In this video, we'll be looking at unemployment. We'll be looking at the different types of unemployment and the measures that we use to measure the rate of unemployment. So the first type of unemployment that we'll be looking at is frictional, and this is when workers or people in general are moving between occupations. So, for example, perhaps your contract has ended at company A and you're aware of this, so you signed a contract with company B where you're due to start in 2 months. This period of limbo is frictional unemployment. Additionally, there's structural unemployment, which is where there's a mismatch of skills between available jobs and workers. This can take the form of occupational or geographic immobility. So when we think of occupational immobility, we think maybe, for example, of factory workers in the UK during deindustrialisation. There is a reduction in demand for factory-related skills, and so these workers tend to be unemployed. Additionally, geographic immobility, which is when maybe workers are unable to move from job to job because of geographical barriers. So potentially you live in Manchester, but there's a lot of jobs going in London, but you don't want to pay for the transport to go to London because it's too expensive. Additionally, there's seasonal unemployment. So this is when demand for labour changes in some industries seasonally. This is because there's different demand in different industries, and therefore different demand for labour. So take fruit picking, for example. You might have some fruits that are harvested in the summer months, and so you will need more labour during these months compared to other months. Additionally, like seasonal workers in firms like Aldi, Tesco. And then the next form of unemployment is real wage unemployment, which is when wage rates are set above equilibrium. So we can actually show this diagrammatically. So if we just have a simple supply and demand diagram, we have the wage rate on the y-axis, and on the x-axis we have just the quantity of labour. So if we have demand, we have supply. In a competitive market, the wage rate would be at equilibrium. So W star, Q star at equilibrium. Potentially regulators have come in and set a minimum wage. And so we have a minimum wage above the equilibrium at W min. And therefore, if wages are higher, more people are going to want to work. And so there's enhanced supply of workers at QS. However, hiring workers is more costly for a business, and so demand contracts from E to here. So we have QD. And there is no longer a point where supply is equal to demand, and we have excess supply. Where this excess manifests in the labour market as unemployment, where these workers here have advantage because they are now being paid a higher wage. However, these workers here have lost their job, and these portion of workers here can't find a new job because wages are simply too high. The final component, or the final type of unemployment, is cyclical unemployment. This is unemployment caused from periods of economic downturn. So, for example, recession. Take maybe the travel and tourism industry. When a recession hits and confidence is low, households are more likely to save and less likely to spend money on holidays. And so there's less demand in the travel and tourism sector. Because there's less demand for the goods and services provided there will be less demand for workers, resulting in higher unemployment, manifesting as cyclical unemployment. Okay, so now we'll move on to the measures of unemployment. This is particularly relevant for the UK. So we have the Labour Force Survey and the Claimant Count. So the first thing we'll be looking at is the Labour Force Survey. This is a survey as a kind of reference in the name. It's issued by the ILO, the International Labour Organization, and it's distributed to around 60,000 households in the UK aged 16 to 65. Where to be classified as unemployed, you have to be out of work but have found a job and waiting to start in the next 2 weeks, or you don't have a job but you've actively sought work in the last 4 weeks and are able to start in the next 2 weeks. So the advantages of this survey is that it's international, so the same criteria exists in every country, and so it's better for international comparison. However, the drawbacks is that there's sample bias. Potentially the surveys that are being distributed do not match the accurate unemployment distributions throughout the UK. There's also the risk of dishonesty with surveys. People often have a tendency to lie. Potentially they're dissatisfied with their current unemployment status, and so they're maybe over exaggerating, maybe venting a little bit and putting that they are unemployed when they're just simply unhappy with their current situation. There's obviously also the risk of statistical calculation errors, which may under or overestimate the real rate of unemployment. And also with every survey, it's expensive to distribute. So the second measurement we will be looking at is the claimant count. And this is a measure of the number of people claiming JSA, which is Job Seekers Allowance. There's generally two types of JSA, which is contribution-based and income-based. So contribution-based is if you've paid national insurance for around 2 years, you can be paid JSA whatever your income and savings. And this usually can be paid for about 6 months. And then there's income-based JSA, which is paid to those on low incomes with low savings, even if you've not made those 2 years of national insurance contributions. And this is available for those aged 18 and above. And so the benefit to this measure is that it's readily available and there's cheap data collection compared to the ILO, which is quite expensive, as we mentioned before. However, there are drawbacks, which is that it's poor for international comparisons, and this is because between different countries there'll be different criteria for who's eligible to claim JSA. And if we're kind of comparing based off different criteria, then we're going to have an inaccurate outlook on and a poor basis for comparison. Additionally, we mentioned before that this applies to those aged 18 and above, and therefore those who are under 18, maybe 16 to 18, are ignored, whereas in the ILO, in the LFS, they are recognised. Additionally, not everybody who's eligible claims. Often there's an information gap. This is particularly true for self-employed people between jobs who don't realise that they can claim, and so they don't, and that will deflate statistics. But there's also a stigma in claiming JSA where people don't want to claim, again, deflating statistics. Additionally, not everyone will be eligible for contribution-based JSA, but technically be out of work. And finally, there's the risk of fraud, where people who aren't eligible for JSA are potentially faking their finances and misleading the civil service such that they are receiving JSA, and that can inflate statistics. So these are some things to consider with the LFS claimant count. Additionally, we must learn the different types of unemployment. So it's probably useful to learn the definitions and give a few examples.